What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're here to review this beast back here. This is the Huddig 1260D. It is an unbelievable piece of equipment we've been reviewing over the last 2 weeks. Vancer and Huddig have both graciously partnered up to bring this machine out to us and let us literally play with it for 2 weeks. And we've been having an absolute blast. So without further ado, let's go review this thing. All right, guys, so we're gonna start the review basically by talking about the back of the machine. At least it looks like this is the back of the machine, because for most backhoes, if you will, this would be the back of the machine. But that's where the Huddig isn't like any other machine. This thing looks like a backhoe and a loader beautifully came together and created this wonderful machine. And you're gonna absolutely, especially as an American, try to classify this as either a loader or a backhoe, when in reality, this is neither of those machines. This thing spends 80% of its time in this configuration, with you spun around, your seat facing backwards, while you zip around the job site at about 13 to 14 miles an hour, doing whatever you need to do. That's not like a backhoe. It's totally unlike a backhoe because of the capabilities that gives you right there. We were doing just the stupidest of tasks is where this machine really shines. I had to go get a bucket the other day here at the farm, and instead of having to use two separate machines or just an excavator to go out back, get the bucket because it was in a tight spot, we were able to get it with the back arm. And instead of having an excavator that was going to take 10 minutes to track to the front of the farm here, instead I was able to grab it with the back arm of this thing, and at 14 miles an hour, zip it up to the front of the farm here, and there wasn't any waiting. I mean, it was just, everything was able to be done with one machine. Another prime example, we were out drain tiling, and we'll flash to some of that footage so you can see. I had to run down here to the main farm to get one last roll of drain tile. And these things are massive. These things are probably 8 foot in diameter. And so you can't see when you've got it out in front of you. And so when I was forking into those edge drain rolls or drain tile rolls, you couldn't see out of the front of the machine. In a normal loader or a normal backhoe, guess what? You're either stuck doing that or you're stuck looking over your shoulder driving in reverse the whole time. With the Huddig, I was able to spin my seat around and very quickly go zipping down the road at, again, 13 to 14 miles an hour in reverse. And I was totally in control because this thing does articulate in the middle like a loader. So with that being said, let's kind of do a quick walk around of the machine. We can talk about some of the aspects of the machine that I really enjoyed, and then we can start getting into some of the shortcomings of the machine or just potential areas I could see improvement. Starting at the back of the machine, you're going to notice this unit is equipped with a tilt rotator. This is the official roto-tilt version of the tilt rotator, although after speaking with Huddig, the unit can be equipped with any manufacturer you deem worthy of going on your machine. Typically, what they will do is plumb the hydraulics, send it to the dealership, and the dealership will put on whatever manufacturer they choose. Now, I will say the tilt rotator makes this machine unbelievably versatile in the things that you can do, and it really takes you back to square one on operating. Once you finally get your hands under you again, though, it is unbelievable what you can do with the tilt rotator. Now, another thing that this is awesome, just absolutely awesome about this machine, you do have a low flow hydraulic circuit that is plumbed all the way down and stubs out right here just above your bucket. As long as you can couple to this standard coupler, this is a standard coupler on this machine that comes on the Rototilt, as long as you can couple an attachment to this machine and you have the hydraulic flow necessary, you can run whatever you can dream up on the back of this machine. I have seen YouTube videos of guys with brush cutters, with flail mowers. I've seen guys with just ridiculously unique attachments, chain trenchers, plows for plowing and utilities. It is unbelievable how flexible this machine is. And part of what makes it so flexible is the number of hydraulic circuits. So you have your rototilt circuit, which if you wanted to disconnect and use for something else, you absolutely could do that. You have a low flow circuit that you can use for a function. And then coming over to the other side of the boom here, we actually have a high flow circuit that is capable of running, I believe, about 44 to 47 gallons a minute. And the reason I say about is because this is another example of me having to do conversions, because this is a metric European machine. So you have got a phenomenal amount of flow coming off of this machine. You can run a huge variety of attachments, and I'm going to be honest, this back arm, when I initially looked at the machine, I thought looked a little weak. It seemed like it was a little thin compared to a cat or a case backhoe, where we're used to that big fat boom. And so I was really expecting for this thing to really underperform on the backhoe side. And in reality, that is not at all the case. This thing is stout. You could easily throw, we've got a neighbor down the road that had a tree shear that by itself weighs about 3,500 pounds. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't think this thing would have had a problem throwing that thing around. It would have been a little heavy for it, but at the same time, I don't think you would have had a problem with this machine handling that weight. All right, so kind of moving a little further up the machine, we have our rail gear. So this is a rail machine, and so far Huddig has found most of its success in the US market with the rail companies, and that's why this came with a set of rail gear. This is not, this is an option. It's not going to come on every machine, and so it's not something you have to worry about the additional weight. You have to worry about the additional issues of things dragging in the mud. If you were to purchase one of these machines for a non-rail purpose, you can get these machines without the rail gear. That being said, they've done a phenomenal job of implementing the rail gear. It's very easy. You have one switch in the cab that changes your outriggers over to operating the rail gear, and then it automatically limits your speed to about 13 kilometers an hour if you are in rail mode, keeping you safe while you're running the rails. As soon as you click out of that mode, you're back to your paddles on your armrest, back to operating your outriggers, and you're back to full speed. Now, moving to the outriggers, these things are huge. As you can see with me standing next to these things are huge, they're massive, and yet you hardly ever use these things. I think I used these maybe 2 or 3 times the entire time we had this machine, and let's be honest, it's because I'm a rookie. I guarantee you any of the guys over in Sweden would probably laugh at me for even throwing these down. This machine is so stable, you really don't ever use the outriggers. And really, that's such a benefit, because as you'll see in the clips, you're able to zip along at 13 miles an hour in reverse with this machine. Because of the fact that it's so sturdy and stable, you are able to pull yourself around almost like a wheeled excavator, and you don't have to have the outriggers down for stability. I will say most of the time I had the outriggers down about halfway, and it was only so that I didn't have any interference when I was swinging side to side with my boom. But when it came to actually needing the outriggers, there was only one situation where I didn't even really need them, let's be honest. I threw them down as more of a safety net because I'm still familiarizing myself with the machine. I have yet to need the outriggers on this machine. It's just that stable. This machine, one of my small complaints about the back end, and this is just, you do what you can. Like a traditional backhoe, if you are sitting on a little bit of an incline from left to right, you do have a little bit of an issue with the swing. It just doesn't quite have the power like an excavator would to swing uphill, and so the swing does get slow. You have to curl way in close to the machine to kind of get you up there. I don't know that you're going to get any better. It's not any worse than a traditional backhoe when it comes. In fact, I would say you actually have a little bit more power than a traditional backhoe when it comes to the side-to-side swing, but that is one of the shortcomings that I did notice on the back end of this machine. All right, so moving forward on the machine, you have the main articulation and pivot point. So this machine articulates like a loader right here in the middle, but it also pivots. So the front of the machine and the back of the machine actually move independent of one another while you are in transport, whenever you are moving around on the job. As soon as you stop, this thing locks and becomes a rigid frame machine. And it's done with this cylinder right back here that you can see kind of going across the middle. The cool thing about this is, first of all, the reason it locks and becomes a rigid frame machine, if you think about while you're operating the rear of this machine, you want the whole weight of the machine holding you in place. If it were just the rear of the machine, it would be really easy for the back end of the machine to get tippy. So it is really cool that this machine automatically locks in. By the way, quick side note, this also has an automatic parking brake that you can set on your screen in the cab, and as soon as you come to a stop, it will automatically set the parking brake for you so that you're not dragging yourself around with the back arm. It is optional, so you can click that option off, and now you're back to a traditional parking brake, so you have the convenience that you can have it both ways. Now, going back to our pivot point here, the really interesting thing, and where I didn't even get a chance to experiment with this, is you have the ability on the fly with buttons on your armrest, you can lock and unlock this pivot point. Why is that important? Well, you can get yourself into some funky situations. So you can actually lift yourself up with the back portion of the machine set yourself at an awkward angle, and then lock that pivot point so that you are now teeter-tottering on 2 wheels. Where I could potentially see some experimentation, and don't quote me, this is not recommended by Huddig, but at the same time as an operator I want to experiment, is if we wanted to start a swale using our front bucket, could you potentially lock in the front half of the machine, start to drive forward to start your swale cut, and then unlock that pivot point so that the machine would rotate down into that cut. Again, I didn't get to experiment with that, and again, I do want to emphasize Huddig does not recommend using that. I don't know if that cylinder could withstand that, but it is an interesting idea that I want to experiment with in the future. You have an emergency cutoff here. One of the cool features about this machine is you can run the entire machine, and you guys have probably seen it in some of my social media stuff. You can run this entire machine with the remote control. You do not have to be in this machine. It's done with a key and on the side panel in the cab. I click that key over, the machine goes dead in the cab, and now all I have to do is start it from my control panel that's hanging at my waist. The whole machine is operational from the ground. That being said, because of that, and because of some of the rail operations and the close proximity operations you have to people on the ground, they have included on this side and the other side of the machine, located in the same spot, an emergency cutoff right here. You can slap, it will totally shut the machine down. Really nice feature. You have the fuel tank, def tank, that's all located right here at ground level. It's very easy to check. Within this wheel well here or fender, you have your battery box, you have your jump startability. Right here you have the master cutoff. And what I really like about this machine, because it is equipped with DEF, as you guys know, when you have a machine with DEF, when you shut the machine off, it pumps that DEF back into the tank so that you don't have any freezing issues. If you shut the master off before that DEF has pumped back in, it leaves DEF in the line. This machine comes with a little disconnect light right here. As that is illuminated, it is actively pumping DEF back into the tank. When that extinguishes, you are free to shut off the master. All right, so moving forward on the machine, we have the front bucket, and this thing, like, this is a good sized bucket. I believe this is a 2.5 yard bucket. By the time you heap it, you can easily get 3 to 3.5 yards. As I stated, this machine really does curl the bucket back to where it cradles the material, and so you're able to heap the sucker pretty dang high. I wasn't sure how I was gonna like the long floor front bucket. It does require totally loading the bucket differently than you traditionally would. You have to curl, as I stated, much sooner as you go into the pile. It's not that big of a deal once you get the hang of it, but the first couple times you go into a pile and go, oh man, this thing doesn't have any curl power. It just takes getting used to the long floor bucket. This thing holds a crap load of material though. This machine does come standard with front auxiliary hydraulics, and again, as long as you can couple to this coupler, as long as you have the hydraulic flow you need, you have a phenomenal amount of options. I have seen guys with brooms, 4-in-1 buckets, grapple buckets. This actually has a crane mode where you can purchase a separate man lift that will mount to this front coupler. You set it down on the ground, you put the machine into crane mode. You now have the ability to have 2 man lifts on this machine. If you get the option of the man lift on the actual frame of the machine, you have that man lift. In addition, you can operate this man lift at the same time. 2 freaking man lifts on one machine. It's unbelievable how versatile this machine is. It just blows my mind. All right, moving around to the other side of the machine. This is, if you will, the passenger side of the machine. We actually have a storage compartment right here in this fender. That is where I am keeping the chains for the stabilizers for transport, but you could keep some small tools and stuff. It's not a phenomenal amount of room, but still, it is nice to have the extra storage space. Directly behind that, we have the SCR for the exhaust package on this machine. It does use DEF, you know, take it or leave it. I will say this, I was originally under the impression that this machine came with a DPF and an SCR, which I was very not happy about. After digging into the specs a little more, it turns out it is a DOC, not a DPF, so you don't have to worry about DPF issues. The only potentially problematic emissions issue you might have are some DEF problems. Everybody in the industry is plagued by problems with those. That's no dig at Huddig whatsoever. That is just, it is what it is. And let's face it, it's a necessary evil now with all of the tier 4 emissions. We have our emergency cutoff here on this side, and then I wanted to get into this right here. We have our sight glass right here for our hydraulic tank, very easy to look at, very easy to read. But right here is where you jack the machine up, the cab of the machine, if you have to perform any sort of maintenance. So underneath the cab, we did actually jack this up. I will flash to some footage of that. There is a lot going on under there. I would not want to be a mechanic working on this machine after popping this hood up or popping the cab up. There is a lot going on. There's not a phenomenal amount of room because of all of the hoses being routed through that area. But again, how are you going to do it much differently? That being said, to raise the cab on this machine, you have a bolt right here that you will loosen. There's one on the other side in the exact same spot. They don't actually drop out. They basically have a little retainer in there so that you will feel it kind of drop a little bit. And then you are able to take your bottle jack here and jack the cab up. It's a very straightforward, very easy process. Moving into the cab of the machine, you really begin to grasp just how complicated the Huddig is. It is very overwhelming, especially as an American, when you first step into the cab and you see all of the buttons and the pedals and the joysticks and the switches. There's a lot going on with this machine, yet when you really get down to it, it's pretty dang intuitive. Now, this is a very comfortable cab. The chair on the unit that I was running was heated and cooled. It had so many adjustments on this thing. It's unreal. At least 2 separate lumbar support adjustments. You've got multiple adjustments on each armrest. You can really customize this thing to the way you want it to feel. You also have sunshades all around the cab to help you on all windows to block out the sun. And after speaking to some other Huddig operators and owners, I did learn this is one of the problematic areas for the 1260D in particular. The HVAC system has a difficult time keeping up with the heat even on a mild day. Now, when we were testing this unit, it was pretty cool in Michigan, so I didn't have any issues with the cab overheating, but I have talked to other operators who have said the 1260 really struggles to keep up with the heat. Now, I have also been told this has been updated in the newer 1370 model of the Huddig, so Huddig did address this issue on later models. I have to say, out of all of the equipment I have ever run, this is legitimately one of the most comfortable machines I have ever run. It's got a fantastic air ride suspension seat. Combined with the weight of the machine and the spread of the wheels, this is a really smooth ride even in really bumpy conditions. I cannot stress that enough. This has been a very comfortable machine. One of the things I love the most about this machine is the layout of the cab. This is one thing Europeans absolutely excel at. Everything is extremely well thought out. Your hands never leave the controls. Outside of being in road mode, and road mode means I can go top speed 26 miles an hour. That is the only time you have to use the steering wheel. When you are in work mode, which by the way is one quick button right here on my armrest, we're in work mode. Everything is here. My steering is here. My controls for all of my functions are here. My coupler is here. My outriggers are here. Everything you need. I can lock the pivot, the center pivot on this machine. I can lock and unlock from buttons right here on the armrest. So the entire time I'm operating this machine, my hands never leave the armrest. And that includes going from operating the front loader bucket to operating the back arms of the machines. My hands never have to leave the joysticks. That is a wonderful layout. I absolutely love that about this machine. So really, really well thought out controls. The joysticks, I cannot tell you enough. These are EH controls. Obviously, you're not going to get feedback from your fingertips as far as hydraulic pressure goes. I will say you're able to feel it through the machine just fine. These joysticks are an absolute treat to run. They are super comfortable. It's not like the American machines where you're having to use your whole arm. Everything on this machine is done with just small fingertip adjustments. It's very comfortable to operate. You've also got the ability with a push button right here. If I am in the front configuration, I can with one button switch these controls over to where I'm operating the rear of the machine. So if we're going down the road, you have a low power line, it's very quick on the fly while you are driving down the road. You can hit this button right right here, boom, down, and then let go of the button, you're back to operating all of your front controls in the machine. Similarly, if we're spun around to the rear, you need to lower your bucket for more stability, or you need to raise it to clear something. You just hit the button when you're facing back in the chair, and you can now operate your front bucket with your controls right here. Let off the button, you're back to being live in the rear. It's just everything about this machine is so well thought out in the cab. I cannot stress that enough. It is a true joy to operate this machine. As far as controls go in this machine, you have 3 pedals in the front. You have a traditional gas pedal, you have a traditional brake pedal, and then you have what's called the inching pedal. Really, what I've had to do is change my brain over to thinking of the inching pedal as a traditional kind of clutch brake pedal in a loader. While it's not a true brake, it's not going to stop the machine like a brake will. It is more of a clutch pedal where you, as you go into a pile, you're going to hammer all the way down with your gas pedal, and then you're going to control your creep speed with your inching pedal. That's a really nice feature. I do kind of wish that they were combined into one pedal, more like a traditional loader, but again, that's kind of a nitpicky thing because that's what I'm used to. It did not take any time at all for me to get used to this configuration. In the back of this machine, you also have an additional gas pedal and brake pedal. You do not have the inching pedal. Driving this machine in reverse is exactly like driving it when you're turned around forward. You're going to use your gas pedal to go, you're going to use your brake pedal to stop, and you're going to use your little ring gear here on your controls to do all of your steering. It's very intuitive. Once you kind of get your brain back in order after getting over the weirdness of the machine, it's actually shockingly intuitive to run this machine. It really isn't that bad of a learning curve once you get used to just all of the differences between this machine and a traditional loader or a traditional backhoe. Another aspect of this machine that is really awesome, again, just the way the Europeans have laid this machine out and thought everything through, really well done. All of your hydraulic functions are controlled, as well as your traction control, your top speed, your auto greaser, your mirror heaters, everything is controlled with this panel right over here. It's very bright. You don't have any issues seeing this during the day in broad daylight. So it's a very, very nice screen. It is a touch screen, so you're able to use it as a touch screen. But again, thinking about really the controls while you're operating, you don't even have to use the touchscreen. I have a dial. It's a little knob over here on my right hand joystick, and by twisting that dial and that knob and clicking down, I can select any one of my hydraulic circuits. I can dial down the flow. I can select my traction control. I can dial down how much traction control I want to apply. I can enable that and disable it all from this dial right here. It's a really, really handy feature to have. Your hands never have to leave the controls. Now, if you do want to get into some of the engine diagnostics, if you want to get into some of your other informational screens, you do have a knob and a dial right down here that allows you to scroll between the upper portion and the lower portion of the screen. And within each portion of that screen, you have the ability to go through multiple pages, and some of those pages allow you to customize the buttons on your controls. For instance, I have F7 here on my armrest set to start and stop the engine. F6 I can have either set to be my mirror heaters, or I can have it be power boost, so that's readily available at my fingertips. All of my buttons here that have F numbers on them are customizable, and that is all done within the screen of the computer. It's a really, really nicely designed, well laid out machine. All right, so overall this machine is incredible. The only way I can really describe what this machine does to you as an operator is it takes your brain, it explodes it. Over the course of like a day and a half, 2 days, you totally explode your brain because it's so different than anything you've ever run before. And then you slowly bring your brain back together in a completely new configuration, and you're able to start thinking about out-of-the-box ways you can use this machine. And really, the more you use it, the more ideas you have on ways that you can do jobs that you've done traditionally with 2 machines or 3 machines. You start realizing, oh, I could take this machine, I can manipulate it in this way, and then I can do it with 1 machine. So this thing, I cannot praise enough how awesome this machine is. Now, that being said, there are a few drawbacks to this machine. There are a couple areas that I could see some potential improvements. One of the big drawbacks on this machine, unfortunately, is the visibility out of the front. And I'm gonna flash to a couple clips here where you can really get a grasp. Visibility is very limited out of the front due to the fact that the engine is in the front. You know, with a loader, you would traditionally have the engine in the back, which gives you great visibility out of the front of the machine. Unfortunately, because your engine is in front of this machine, and it is a big engine, like I said, that was a 6.7 Cummins, it's a stout engine, it takes up a lot of room, you have some limited visibility out of the front of the cab. This comes into play really in two situations. One is when you are getting ready to go into a pile or do any sort of back dragging and the bucket is super low to the ground, it almost drops entirely out of view over the fenders of the machine. The second time that this really comes into play is when you go to couple into your bucket or a set of forks or another front attachment. Visibility is really, it's difficult to see the attachment, I'm not gonna lie. So you generally have to look right down the side of the fender, between the fender of the machine and the machine itself. There is a very small window that you can kind of see through there. That being said, as poor as visibility is out of the front of the cab, within an afternoon of running this machine, I was consistently able to get into a bucket the first time. It's like any other piece of equipment. As you learn the machine, as you get more comfortable with where the end of your boom arms are, you start to get a feel for where your machine is. And at the end of the day, it's not that huge of a deal. I was able to run this machine very efficiently, even with the limited visibility. But that being said, the front visibility of this machine leads me to another area that I could see improvement on this machine, and that's with the bucket design itself. So as you guys know who have run backhoes and loaders, there's generally a spot on the bucket that is parallel with your cutting edge. And on this particular bucket, it resides right down here. And yes, you're seeing that, that's about knee level. It's very low on this bucket. The problem with that is, I don't typically use my level indicator on the side of the boom. And the reason I don't typically do that is because you're not always going to want to come into a pile perfectly flat with the ground. If you're shaping a berm or something along those lines, you may actually want to use your bucket in different angles, and you need to know where your cutting edge is. What I typically do, and I've always done since I ran loader, is I typically use this area of the bucket that's parallel with the cutting edge. The problem on this particular bucket design is that it's so low, it totally drops out of sight with your fender here. And so you can't see over the fender to get a gauge for where your cutting edge is. If this flat area were just moved towards the top of the bucket, you'd still have really good visibility of the flat spot on the bucket. You're never going to see the cutting edge, but that's fine. As long as I could see my level indicator here on the bucket, I'm in good shape. And unfortunately with this bucket design, you can't see that. Now another area that this machine, I could see it using some improvement, is with the actual boom cylinders and bucket cylinders. So when it comes to the boom cylinders, one thing I will say is you can really stab into a pile. And because of this bucket being it's got a long floor on this bucket, it requires a lot of strength to get that bucket out of the material. And so the boom cylinders in particular, on most loaders, even when you are stabbed fully into a pile, those boom cylinders are powerful enough that you can crank back and you're going to lift the boom arms. On this machine, the boom cylinders seemed just a hair underpowered. It's not a phenomenal amount that they seem underpowered. It's really right on the verge. But when you were fully into a pile and you pulled back on your boom, there were several times where the boom simply would not move without me actually pulling out of the pile just a hair. And again, I'm talking 6 inches to a foot of backing up, and you've got plenty of power that you're able to bring that boom up. But to me, it just, when I'm comparing it to a loader of a comparable size, the boom cylinder seemed just a tad underpowered on this machine. That brings me to the bucket cylinders. The bucket cylinders themselves, I have never been a fan of the IT configuration where you have 2 cylinders curling the bucket on the end stroke. I have always, and I don't know if this is true or not, but it's always struck me that cylinders have significantly more power when they're pushing out than when they're pulling in. And so anytime you get into a situation where you've got 2 bucket curl cylinders that are pulling in to provide the power to curl the bucket, they've always seemed very weak to me, and that seems to be the case on this machine as well. When we're in the middle of curling into a pile to grab a full bucket, it's a combination of the long floor bucket and the weakness of the cylinders. You actually have to curl as you go into the pile significantly earlier than you would with a backhoe or a loader, and it's because it doesn't have the curl power to really fill the bucket before you start curling. You actually have to curl and ride the pile up with the bucket to fill the bucket. That being said, it is totally possible to get a full bucket with this machine. I was able to do it consistently, so it's not lacking power so much from I can't fill the bucket standpoint. But where it really lacks power in my mind is when you're carrying material. Now this bucket does curl all the way back so that it is almost cradling the material in the bucket. And so I'm, totally working off of my guesstimation here. I think you can easily carry 3 to 3.5 yards with this bucket. This is a large bucket and you can really heap the snot out of this thing. Unfortunately, when you go to road that material, when you hit a pretty good bounce, and I tried this with a float switch in all 3 positions, float totally off, regular job site float, and then your road mode, if you will, where you've got a lot of float. Even with the switch in all 3 positions, when I would hit a good bounce, when I would hit a good bump with this machine with a bucket full of material, these bucket cylinders would go over relief just a hair, and you would actually see the bucket uncurl just a slight amount. It wouldn't go crazy. It's not like it's going to dump half of your load, but at the same time, in my mind, if the bucket's capable of carrying 3.5 yards, the bucket cylinders should be able to hold that material without being pushed over relief. On a dirt job site, you're really not gonna have any issues with that. Where I could see that becoming a problem is if you are on a road job, you're running this down an actual busy paved road, and you hit a big enough of a bounce, all of a sudden your your bucket cylinders uncurl just a hair, and now you've got a mess that you've got to go back and clean up. So that is one potential shortcoming up here on the front of the machine. All right, another area of this machine I could see a little bit of improvement upon, and really we're starting to get into my being a prissy operator and getting a little nitpicky. Washing the windows on this machine is not the easiest of tasks. So when we did first get this machine, I did want to spend some time sprucing it up, and so I did wash the windows off because they were pretty dirty from transport. When I did that, it very quickly became apparent that this is not an easy task on this machine. The front isn't actually too bad because you do have a step right here, right behind the fender on each side. So you are able to straddle the side of the machine, lean forward. You can get your front glass just fine, along with the side panel here and on the other side. Now where it gets a little tricky is when you move towards the back of the machine here, because you can't really stand on this fender, or if you have the man lift package, there's going to be a huge pedestal here for the man lift. And so you are physically not going to be able to stand anywhere in this area to get this glass. So it does require you reaching pretty far from standing on the step here, or I had to lower the outrigger hair and climb up on the outrigger. Getting the back glass proved to be pretty tricky just because there's not a lot of footing back there without actually climbing up on the swing tower in order to get your footing correct so that you can reach the window. So again, this is getting a little nitpicky. This isn't something that I can see them, going out of their way to massively improve, because it's me being a prissy operator. But that is one thing that was a little bit more difficult on this machine than perhaps maybe doing a loader or a traditional backhoe. All right, so moving into the cab, we've got a couple things. Again, most of these are fairly nitpicky. None of the negatives on this machine make me stand back and say, oh my gosh, I'm not gonna touch that thing. Overall, this machine is a really, really great machine to operate. But in the cab, there are a couple things that I could see them improving upon, especially to bring this machine to the American market. So my first complaint, and this is a real one, guys, up until 2 days ago I had a nice little blood blister on my pinky finger here, is the door handle. You've got a door handle right here that you pinch or you squeeze in order to close. And if you get your pinky finger just a little too close here on the back, it will pinch the snot out of your finger. And my God, it hurts. And I've done that twice on that door handle. So that is just one of my prissy complaints, that the door handle drives me nuts on this machine. I have to make sure that I'm grabbing it closer to the front of the handle so I don't pinch myself. Another aspect of this machine that really boils down to being in the American market is this is a European machine through and through. Everything is in kilometers per hour. Everything is in liters per hour. Nothing is in standard units. And as far as I can find in the menus, there's no way to change that. So it's very clear that this is a European machine. And so I've been having to do a lot of conversions when it comes to figuring out how fast I'm actually going down the road, or when it comes to knowing what my flow rates are on the auxiliary hydraulics. It would be nice on future units that they bring to the US if they could convert some of these units over, just so that you're not constantly having to pull your phone out and Google how many gallons a minute is 14 liters an hour or whatever. There's just a lot of converting going on. Another small complaint, and I wouldn't even call this a complaint, more of an improvement that I could see done to the machine. You already have everything you need here on your joysticks. My hands never have to leave the joysticks on this machine, which is beautiful when it comes to operating. Now, one of the things I like to do when I get in and out of the cab is I like to turn the joysticks off so that you don't accidentally catch it with your sweatshirt or your hoodie and cause an accident. Especially with these EH controls on this machine, it would be very, very easy to do. And so what I like to do is there's a switch right behind me here that turns my joysticks off. Now, unfortunately, because of the location of that switch, it can be a little inconvenient to hit that. Now, one of the things I like to do in this machine when I'm getting in and out is if I'm operating from the back or from the front, I will spin my chair to this orientation right here, because now I have a very easy path to get in and out of the machine. But in order to flip that switch to turn my joysticks off, I'm reaching behind me. It would be really nice to have that function actually up here as an additional button. And I know there's already a lot of buttons on this machine on the joysticks or on the armrests, but to have that be a one push button up here that will turn my joysticks on and off, that way I'm not reaching behind me. Again, this is more of an improvement to the machine. It's something that I would like to see as a feature, not necessarily, this is no negative of the machine. It's more of a convenience factor for me. A couple other small things I would like to see on the machine. Again, going for the American market. These guys are clearly a European company, and the American market is just a different market. Case in point, the seatbelt on this machine is made for skinny guys. This is the extent of the seatbelt that they give you. And I did test this. In fact, that's how I figured this out with my 5-year-old son who wanted to ride in my lap. We could not get this seatbelt to fasten around him sitting in my lap while we were in the machine. Now, for a skinny guy like me, that's not a problem, but this is America, and let's be honest, we have a lot of bigger operators in America. That could potentially cause some problems with some of the bigger guys not being able to get that seatbelt fastened around them. So that is one thing I would absolutely recommend Huddig improve, is actually lengthening the seatbelt by another foot or so, just so you've got plenty of seatbelt for some of our bigger operators. Another small thing, again, being a nitpicky American, this unit doesn't have a cup holder in it. And so you wouldn't think that would be that big of a deal. And I'm all for the European outlook where when you're in a car, you're there to drive. When you're in a piece of equipment, you're there to operate. But I also recognize that I'm an operator in America. I really love my Monster, and I have nowhere to put my Monster in this cab where it's not going to tip or spill or get jostled. So that is another improvement that I would love to see made on the machine. But again, I'm being a picky American at this point. One aspect of this machine that I did not actually get video of, just limitations of my camera equipment in all honesty, is the light package on this. It does have an LED light package. Lighting is fantastic. You do not have any visibility issues whatsoever at night, with the exception of they are so bright you actually get a little glare reflected in the cab. In all honesty though, most loaders that I have operated that have had a good light package on them, you really run into the same problem, so that's not something that's going to be unique to the Huddig. Overall, I don't know how to express how awesome this machine has been. From day one, this has been like being an operator in the industry for the first time again. I have never experienced that feeling since I got into the industry, just because, as we all know, especially in the American market, you go from one backhoe to another, they're still backhoes. It's just everyone's got a different spin on it. You get into a loader and it's just another loader. You get into a dozer, it's just another dozer. This is the first machine that I have ever gotten into since I became an operator that totally takes me back to day one. I have to totally rethink how I'm going to utilize the machine and you really start to understand just how little you know about this machine. You can't apply your loader dynamics to this machine. You can't apply your backhoe dynamics to this machine because it's not either one of those machines. Even though it looks like it from the outside, the way you utilize this machine is so different that you are back to day one when it comes to operating. Performance-wise, this machine has been incredible. I'm not gonna lie, the first time I saw this, I thought it was gonna be an absolute dog, especially when I figured out that you could drive in reverse while you're running your backhoe functions. I thought there's no way the hydraulic pumps are gonna keep up. You're gonna bog this machine down when you try to use the arm and pull yourself around while you're driving and articulating. I could not be more wrong. This thing has got power. It has got the hydraulic flow that you need to perform all of those functions at the same time. It does it beautifully. It is an unbelievable machine. The one Achilles heel of this machine, and again, I do want to stress this is in its current configuration. As you can see, this is the rail package, which means it has road tires on it. These are not the knobby off-road tires. These do not have phenomenal flotation. They don't have, you can get this, by the way, with a track package, like a quad track tractor. It will come with a track package. That is obviously a substantial upgrade to this machine, but still, you can get this machine with tracks. I've seen guys throw a set of duals on them. I mean, it is unbelievable, the flexibility of this machine. But in our current configuration, we did find that this machine struggled in the mud. It's to be expected. Any loader or backhoe with road tires on it would have the exact same problem. As you guys are probably familiar, as soon as those tires load up with mud, they become basically slicks and you get zero traction. Now, yet another testament to this machine. We were in snotty topsoil. I was dragging myself around with the back arm. I never once got stuck. I was always able to drag myself around, to the point that all of the other guys on the job site were actually impressed at how maneuverable I was able to be in the conditions that we were in. So another testament to this machine. You're going to have a real tough time getting this thing stuck. Now, the flip side of that is when you get this thing stuck, you better have something big to pull it out, because this thing weighs in at 18 tons. It is a very heavy machine. It's nimble. I will say for an 18-ton machine, it is a very nimble machine, but you also have to bear in mind this is a very heavy machine. So when it comes to getting this thing out, if you get it stuck, when it comes to transportation, that is something you need to bear in mind. Another aspect of this machine that you have to bear in mind is the height. I don't have that stat right off the top of my head, but this is an extremely tall machine, and you have to be aware of that when you are roading this or transporting it. Multiple times driving this through town, when we did some experiments with roading, there were a couple power lines that I was a little questionable, and I would have to pull over and just verify that I had the clearance. It is an extremely tall machine, so you will have to be mindful of that as you drive it around. But overall, I mean, I cannot praise this machine enough. The abilities of the machine, the power of the machine. It is a 6.7 Cummins with 157 horsepower. This thing has the power to accomplish whatever you need it to. When it comes to the mud, it was not a lack of torque. It was not a lack of power. It was simply a lack of traction that was not allowing us to get around on the job. Had we had the right tires or a set of tracks, this thing absolutely, I 100% believe we would have had no issues with the mud. It's really the road tires that killed us on that. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know how to end this. I don't want to give the machine back. That is how sold I am on this machine. I do not want to give this machine back. It has been an absolute beast. We've done some really cool things with it, and I feel like another week to 2 weeks in the seat, and I would just start to get this thing down to where I would really be more in the experimentation and play phase rather than trying to figure out how everything works and how I can utilize it. One thing you need to be aware of as a contractor, this is probably going to be the true Achilles heel of the Huddig for a while, is dealer support. Unfortunately, these guys have 2, I think maybe 3 dealerships in the US right now, and so your dealer support is going to be limited on this machine. that's just one of the drawbacks of this machine, and them still trying to get off the ground here in the US, is until they get more dealerships on board, your support is going to be limited. This machine does have a lot of diagnostic tools built right into it. In the menu system, you can actually get into an area that allows them to remote tap into the machine, and they can do a lot of diagnosing just over the phone and through your smartphone. So that is another advantage of this. And again, the European technology that's really coming into this, they are able to do a lot of stuff without having a tech come out on site. So if you have someone local that you can kind of get them familiar with the machine and they don't mind working on it, you do have the ability to do a lot of stuff without having a dealership role actively involved. So that being said, I think we can wrap this one up. This has been an absolute treat. I do want to say a special thank you to Huddig and to Vancer for bringing this machine out. We have had an absolute blast with it. And again, I don't want to give it back. I'm really hoping that we can continue to do some stuff with Huddig and Vancer in the future. I would love to get this machine back out, maybe get some unique attachments on the back end of it to really showcase that side of the machine, because that's a whole other aspect of this. We only played with this in the dirt. We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of what this machine can do when it comes to all of the attachments and the things that you can really get creative with this machine. And unfortunately, in a 2-week review, I can't even begin to scratch the surface on that. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll get to do some more stuff with Huddig and Vancer in the future. So thank you guys for watching. Let us know what you thought. This is our first equipment review we've ever put out. Let us know if you would like to see more of these. This is something we want to move into to give you guys some truly unbiased independent reviews on equipment. Let us know how we did, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.